Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
And I think that's what we've got to first understand, that when a coach is either gossiping or is demonstrating some kind of undesirable characteristic and behavior, we first got to understand where that comes from. Most of the time, it's going to come from a place of fear. And that's probably, for me, it was, fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of not being desired, people not wanting to work with me. And that all comes down to ego, of course, and understanding how our ego plays a massive role in our decisions. So rewind back to 15 to 19-year-old Nick. I was probably at my worst in that respect, but also my least experience. And obviously we've got to understand that, how that comes hand in hand. As you get more experience, hopefully these coaches will become more self-aware, like I have done. But really, when you're first starting out, I did think I knew everything. Having rubbed shoulders with some of the greatest coaches in the world, I really felt like I was deserved of success and accolades and that kind of stuff. And that does breed problems. So slightly different experience in my earliest coaching or earliest part of my coaching career than Becca. But definitely feel that really self-awareness is going to be the key here. And Dave, we mentioned this so many times in the podcast. We're always talking about self-awareness, aren't we? And how important it is, because as you learn and become more experienced, maturing as a coach as well as a human being, you do understand how pivotal being self-aware is really for quality of life, quality of results, relationships. I mean, just about every aspect of your life. So I think that for me was one of the biggest challenges, is that I was maturing as a human at the same time as learning to be a coach. So obviously you're making all sorts of life mistakes, damaging relationships, saying the wrong things, behaving in the wrong way, having an ego. Now, this is stuff which is actually nothing to do with coaching necessarily. It's just where I was and where other people will be in their journey as maturing as an individual, like emotional maturity, emotional intelligence, lack of self-awareness, and all those things. So when you combine those individual characteristics then with actually not really knowing much about gymnastics either, but thinking that you do, it creates a bit of a recipe for disaster, right? You start to make all sorts of mistakes because of your personal qualities. You bring them over into your coaching. And then who gets it? Well, the athletes. The athletes are the ones that ultimately will suffer, either through a coach that doesn't have the right experience, or perhaps saying the wrong things, or being around a coach that's sharing messages which aren't positive for them, or just not being a decent role model. I thought that I didn't necessarily need to learn as much as I actually in reality did. So, and again, that's a really dangerous combination of when you don't realize how much you have to learn. It's that Dunning-Kruger effect, the peak of Mount Stupid, they call it. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that model. But there's nothing more dangerous than someone that is completely ignorant without knowing how ignorant they are. And, again, I know this sounds a bit harsh, but the reality is there are a lot of coaches that think they know more than they do. That's just the reality, and that was absolutely me before my 20s, that not having the recognition of, like, truly respecting how much there is to learn in the sport, whether it's the physical side, the technical side, the psychological side, the self-awareness part. There's just so much. And so for me, what I was probably lacking then was someone to tell me that I had the wrong attitude towards that. And so now I feel very, well, when I see coaches that are young, and maybe I see a little bit of myself in them, that they have that attitude of perhaps coming across a little bit egotistical, like they don't want to learn. Instead of criticizing that person, I'm more likely to chat to them and say, look, I've been here. I don't want you to go down the same journey that I did. Whereas actually what I encountered at that age from having that attitude was bullying. I was kind of bullied by other coaches as a result of it. And then I was the source of the gossip. God, have you seen Nick? Like, Nick thinks he knows it all. That didn't help me. Like, what I needed was someone to put their arm around me and say, hey, Nick, okay, we know that you mean well here, but you're going about this wrong. And I think that for me has stayed with me, because there's been a couple of times I've had to approach coaches and say, look, you just don't want to go down the same journey that I did, because it's quite painful having to relive some of those experiences and being on the receiving end of that negativity. And I think you can call it appropriately bullying. It's not pleasant. Now, ultimately, I was the issue, but I needed someone else to help me with that. And so, I can't say it was a case of me feeling unprepared. I felt prepared, but I wasn't. It was that lack of realization about how much there is. And it's that saying, isn't it? You don't know what you don't know. I don't know how well you can rush that process without having a mentor, because you can read a lot of books, but if you're reading it through the frame of, well, I already know this, or this isn't important, or that book's not going to be useful. And again, going on courses and all those sorts of things, it's not going to work if your filter is basically, I'm really good, I don't need to know this stuff. And that's where I think the relationship part is so important, because people can help, whether that's probably therapy is not the appropriate term for this here, but having that relationship and that mentorship and those people around you that can actually guide you and support you and help you with your personal development, I think is crucial. And don't get me wrong,
to realize is it's rarely one giant blowout event with coaches that make them finally give up their coaching and want to be like, I'm done with this gym. It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's all the little social media comments. It's all the little side comments. It's all the neglectful moments when you walk by someone, they don't even look you in the eye because they're trying to like be standoffish. It's like psychological warfare. And it's really what happens a lot of the times, unfortunately, with kids too. And I think that on the solution-based side, one of the things I see in successful gyms are those micro events, those small passing interactions of, hey, how was your day? Or like, how was your weekend? What did you do?
We need to feel connected, to feel fulfilled in a way. And when we're going into a toxic environment, it seeps into every aspect of our life. So it's kind of like all our outside stressors, those seep into the gym. And like, if we're having a toxic gym environment, that's going to seep into our relationships outside. So it's kind of just this massive, roller coaster kind of effect. Like, it just starts to impact all these other things when we're not working on, having that healthier dynamic, healthy coping, all those things that we need to work on ourselves and as a group. So I think one of the biggest things is, if, you're running a gym, like encouraging that dynamic, like usually like the leader of your gym, of your staff, like the owner, whoever is in charge, is they are putting off these vibes. Like we talked about nonverbal communication, and how you just said, smiling at them, helping other people out, giving advice, showing that you're inviting, that your coaches can come and ask you questions, that it is safe for them to do that. And they're not going to be judged or ridiculed if they want some assistance. I think that's what's really important, is if it's got to have that trickle down effect that, we've talked about before. If we have one of our head coaches treating our newest coaches that way, that's so important, because they're showing that this is a safe environment. And then all the other coaching staff is going to start seeing that, and they know that, hey, this is how we need to behave here. This makes me feel good. It makes me want to come to work. So I think that's a huge part on the healthy side, but it's also huge on the unhealthy side, because, if we're showing this toxic environment, even though, those new coaches might be very excited to come in and they're wanting to learn, if they're in this toxic environment, they become toxic. So we're not paying attention to how we're changing this enthusiasm. Like even in our athletes, they're starting to, if they come into a toxic environment, they lose that passion, enthusiasm, so then that leads to all those things like we discussed before, mental blocks and losing that love for the sport and quitting. So I think it's very important in how we're interacting in the gym, the culture, that feel that you have when you come inside. So we just, that in general, I think can change so much in the gym.
Just about perspective, because we're just trying to teach cartwheels, right? It's just like when it comes down to it, this is all just about teaching kids. And I've written down here just perspective. We're teaching cartwheels, of just remembering that we take this so seriously. Like we do take it so seriously, right? When there's just this kind of this bickering, this negativity, this gossip, you just think, sometimes I wonder if the kids actually knew how a lot of the coaches treat each other and the stuff goes on between the coaches, they would be ashamed at us. Like if they actually knew, because really the kids are much better than we are. This is the sort of stuff that you'd see from the children normally in school, and all this kind of bullying and cliques and gossiping, and you think that by the time they get to their adult life, it would have disappeared, but it hasn't. And I feel like we just got to keep it in perspective. We're teaching cartwheels. Let's just not take this so seriously. Like we all love gymnastics, right? Otherwise we wouldn't be involved in it. But when we start to get so competitive that we're treating each other badly, or taking to social media like this, we talked a little bit off air before, didn't we? The sorts of comments and things that are going around on social at the minute on the back of the selections, and everyone feeling like they know what's best for the athletes, although they've never coached at that level in their lives. There's just kind of, let's just remember we're teaching cartwheels, just to keep it in perspective. So that's the
apologizing. When we have those bad interactions because things like influence us, whether it's, what we discussed outside life, or we're just being in a bad mood, feeling insecure, having fear ourselves, because obviously those emotions bring out frustration and anger and how we interact with other people. But apologizing, if you had a bad day, going up to that coach that you might have snapped at, or they came up and asked you a question and you just weren't receptive of helping them, just, hey, I'm so sorry, that I was kind of mean over there, I did not mean to, I'm kind of having a bad day. Like, just saying something short and simple that just makes such a world of difference when it comes to like reforming some of those relationships that might have been like damaged a little bit as you've been during that day or during a year or whatever. Because sometimes we have just a bad year and we don't realize it. So that self-awareness is very big, that we've been talking about. But yeah, go and just say you're sorry. It's going to make a big difference.
I also think that it's worth noting that you don't have to actually like people in order to treat them well. So if you think about the number of times you'll be in a big team or an environment such as competitions and things like that, where you're going to be thrown into the mix with so many different personality types, people on different frequencies than you. They see the world entirely different, and ultimately you might not like someone, and that's okay. That's nothing wrong with having not feeling warm to someone else or wanting to be their friend. However, there's a difference between treating that person badly because you don't like them and still just treating them respectfully. You can still be courteous, you can still be kind, you can still be compassionate, you can be all of those things. Doesn't mean that you need to be, sharing a drink in the bar in the evening and chatting and, and all those kind of things. So I've learned that, I think, and there was a speaker that we had at one of my previous GymCon events that came on stage, Kate Richardson Walsh, and she was a Olympic medalist from Rio, talking about how as a hockey team, there's so many players in a hockey team, and with all those different individuals, you're bound to have characters that just don't get on. But it wasn't about trying to make people like each other; it was just about making people respect each other. And the last thing is patience. So if you don't win that argument, I've done that in inverted commas for people that can't see the video. Okay, if you don't win that argument, just understand that if you nurture that relationship and maintain it, you might later on be able to. I'm trying to think of the way of framing this. Is basically if you damage the relationship, then you're pretty much screwed for any future negotiations that you try and make. If you say, okay, no problem, you want to stick to this way, that's absolutely fine. Not in a controversial way, and you just kind of get on with your coaching, but then 3 months later you can approach the conversation again with a different topic and say, look, I've come across this, would you mind if we give that a go? Maybe your boss, your manager, your senior leaders might turn around and say, yeah, cool, I like that idea, feel free to give that one a go. You don't want to cut the relationship off about something which is quite insignificant, so just think long term and be patient. Now ultimately, people, coaches that run their own gyms and run their own business, if they want to run the gym in a way that, it's my way or the highway, they're entitled to do so. They've developed that environment and that organization around their own kind of success, their own hard work, their own graft. And sometimes you got to come from a place of acceptance that I don't fit in here, not because I'm doing anything wrong, but because my way of viewing things doesn't fit in with the head coaches. And it's the head coach's absolute right to do things the way that they want, because they have built this gym. This is their empire. This is their vision. And I'm going to be respectful of that. But you can just take yourself and you can drop yourself in another gym, another location where your own philosophies and your own principles might fit quite nicely. Now I'm a really open-minded person. I think I'm pretty technical. I've got good knowledge. I've got good experience and credentials. I don't fit into every gym either. So it's not a case of like how good you are. It's about how compatible you are. It's like saying that on a dating site, you might be really good looking and you've got loads, a great personality, but it doesn't mean you're going to be compatible with everybody. There's going to be loads of people on there that you're not compatible with. There's nothing about yourself. It's just, where do you fit into that environment and the people that are around you?